Hi, I'm James, and today on the table here we have a Philips Evnia 32M2N8900 monitor. This is just a first impressions look at the monitor. I picked it up in the Amazon Prime Day sale as I've been looking at buying an OLED for a while, had been looking at the options from MSI and LG particularly, but saw this at over £100 cheaper than other ones I've been considering and thought it might be worth a look. So I'm going to get it unboxed up on the table here and let's look at what it offers. So with the monitor unpacked and on the desk, we can see here we have sort of silver and white colour scheme for the bottom bezel and stand. The stand is all tools-free assembly, so just slots and clips together, one screw, but it can be done by hand. And this is a 4K 240Hz monitor, which is being targeted for gaming, but with colour gamut being DCI-P3 99%, sRGB 147.5, NTSC 120%, and Adobe RGB. I'm hoping this will be good for the Lightroom and other uses that I have for it besides gaming. Otherwise, so this obviously is OLED, does support HDR 400, so it goes up to 400 nits for HDR content and 250 for regular content. In terms of the stand itself, so we have height, tilt, and angle adjustment, all fairly standard. I don't believe we have rotation on this. Let's just check. No, so there's no rotation on it, just height and angle. For me, that's not an issue. I don't have any intention to use this portrait. Looking at connectivity, and on the back of the monitor we have two HDMI 2.1 ports. We also have a DisplayPort 1.4 and USB-C, which can do both data and video, so using DP alt mode for the video. There is also an upstream USB port if you want to connect USB-A back to your system, along with a higher ampage USB-A charging port and a regular USB port. There is also audio out here if you want to have HDMI coming in or DisplayPort coming in with audio and then run that out to your speakers as well. So there is some KVM functionality in this monitor. One feature we do have on this display as well, which isn't one I had on any of the other options I was considering, is there are the Ambi Lights. So we can see here there are LEDs on the rear, and these shine backwards off the monitor, and it's quite a unique Philips feature. You don't see it on anything like the LGs or MSIs, and this can give you some sort of ambient glow based on what is displayed on the screen, so with the lights changing colour to match. This isn't something I've ever actually had before. I don't know how well it will work in my setup because I kind of sit in a corner with 3 monitors. I'm only changing my centre monitor now due to just the cost of trying to replace 3 4K OLED monitors all at once. Going from some BenQ IPS displays to these, it would be a lot of money to buy them all in one go. So it will be interesting to see how that looks and how well that works as well. So with that, I'm going to get this swapped into my office setup and take a look. So having got the monitor up and running and experimented with it for a little while, I think it's a good time to just run through what my first thoughts are of it. So I do use this in a multi-monitor environment, and actually compared to the 2 BenQs I have, which are a good few years old now, are relatively early 4K monitors, if I set colour space to sRGB, it's not a bad match for them. I have switched it to the Adobe RGB setup because I've been doing some Lightroom, and that does give a brighter image, which I quite like. The OSD, so it's a bit awkward to operate as it's behind the monitor for the controls here, and it's reasonably responsive. It's perhaps not the most easy to use, largely because of where it's located. The first change I made is because I'm using HDMI here, in system I have enabled 240Hz mode on HDMI 1. By default it does use 120Hz mode, so I made that change. Some of the settings here I found you can't actually always make through the OSD, and actually the precision center that Philips have, while looking a little on the clunky side, does let you rapidly change settings on here, so we can go through and do things like, you know, turning on and off the lighting very quickly, switching inputs and so on, so we can switch between devices, set up our sound. And actually, if you've got this installed and the USB connected, this is probably going to be a better a better option than doing it through the OSD in a lot of cases. There are various panel care options and so on. Similarly, in Windows, I found that by default things were at 60 Hz, and I manually increased them to 240 Hz. I've also enabled the dynamic refresh rate, so we can see in the OSD the panel is at 60 Hz, and then as we start moving things, this goes up to 240. This will give just a bit of a power saving, potentially both on the GPU and the monitor. And to kind of demonstrate this, so we're running this on a Radeon 7900 XTX, and we can see here, so in 240 Hz mode, the total board power gets very high. And if we turn on the dynamic refresh rate, it drops from 100 watts idling to, it should be able to get sub 40 watts here. This is because the graphics card clocks get pulled up quite significantly when you are using, so I actually have it with multiple displays, and it tends to sit around 100 watts anyway because I have 3 4K displays. But if you have a single display, certainly you'd want to enable this or just keep refresh rates a little bit lower to avoid this happening. And if you go into the tuning tab, you can actually see why this is. So when we have things idle, we run very low VRAM clocks of 170 megahertz, and then as soon as we have any motion on the screen, that increases to over 2 gigahertz, just because of the memory bandwidth required. If we switch this down to 60 hertz, then we should see, although we actually get lower even idling. So do be aware, when you're running high refresh rates on the desktop, it is going to impact on your power consumption, not just of the monitor, but of the graphics card as well. Obviously, when you're gaming, frequencies on all of these are going to be high anyway, but when they're idling, it is going to have quite a significant impact on how the GPU is using power, and it may be that you want to either enable a lower refresh rate, like 120 Hz. So here we can see, even with things in motion, we're peaking out, around 40 watts. I did also notice on the desktop the Ambi Lights are quite distracting and sometimes can sort of pop the colour a bit. So my temptation would be to switch those off and maybe just enable them for gaming. And speaking of gaming, so loading into the excellent Doom 2016, and I think this is actually really where this monitor shines compared to what I had before. Where you have sort of the high contrast in this, you do get really deep blacks, which the IPS screens, even though you didn't get the haloing on those, because they didn't have the zonal backlighting that some monitors have. But here you do get really good contrast between sort of light scenes and dark scenes in a way that you just don't get on a lot of other monitors or on traditional IPS screens. So it's only a quick look at the display here today. There's definitely some tweaking that I wanted to do out of the box just to get it to my liking. But overall, for what this cost, I'm pretty impressed with it. I would like maybe if there was a little bit of rotation adjustment on the monitor itself, on the stand, as I did kind of notice that I don't think I've got the most level desk in the world, and being able to just tweak that very slightly would have helped with that. But I hope you found this video interesting. If you've got any more questions about the display itself, then do pop them in the comments. And if you found this video useful, give us a like and a subscribe. Thanks for watching.